Last week, we established something important. Something has been replaced. Not openly opposed, replaced. And this week, we go deeper. Because if we cannot identify how substitution works, we cannot stop receiving it. This is week 2 of the Remnant Project. Let's begin. Substitution never announces itself. It does not arrive with a declaration. There is no moment where someone stands before the congregation and says, "We are now replacing the truth." That moment never comes. That is why substitution is gradual. That is why it is quiet. Its power is in its silence. Because the deception is not designed for the ignorant. It is designed for the sincere. Scripture warns that if it were possible, even the very elect would be deceived. That means the danger is not out there. It is in here, in the assembly, among the believing. The remnant are not exempt. They are simply those who, by the grace of God, return to what was originally given. But returning requires recognizing what was taken. So how does substitution actually begin? It starts with something you have not seen before. Something that feels out of place in the assembly. A teaching you don't quite recognize. A tradition that wasn't there before. Or a phrase that sounds right but sits wrong in your spirit. Think about the question of who God's covenant people are. That question has a biblical answer, but somewhere that answer was replaced. Not by open debate, not by a council that declared a new position, by silence, by omission, by the gradual disappearance of certain scriptures from teaching until an entire dimension of covenant identity became unfamiliar, then strange, then forgotten. That is not an accident of history. That is substitution at work. What is strange becomes visible. What is visible becomes familiar. And the process, the slow, deliberate process of replacement has already begun before you notice it, before you can name it, before you can say something is off. Here is where the substitution deepens. Because familiarity lowers your resistance. You have seen it enough times now that it no longer feels strange. And what no longer feels strange begins to feel natural. What feels natural begins to feel right. This is not an accident. This is the pattern. Comfort is not neutral. Comfort is the mechanism through which substitution establishes itself. What once felt wrong begins to feel like home. And then the final move. What was foreign is now normal. What was normal, what was the truth, is now the thing that feels uncomfortable. The thing that sounds extreme. The thing that gets you called divisive. This is where the enemy wants the substitution to land. Where covenant language sounds strange. Where biblical identity sounds radical. And where alignment sounds like rebellion. But understand this. The substitution is never complete. God cannot be replaced. What has been exchanged is not him. What has been exchanged is the people's connection to what he established. The access, the understanding, the identity. That is where many in the church are right now. You are not divisive. You are a remnant, aligned with what was established before tradition replaced it. Jesus saw this pattern. He named it directly. He said, but in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. He was not speaking to pagans. He was speaking to the religious leaders of his day, men who knew the scriptures, men who served in the temple, men who believed they were honoring God. That is what he said to them. And it is what he would say to any assembly that has allowed tradition to sit in the place of doctrine. But here's the deeper question. Not just what do you believe, but how did you come to believe it? Was it examined carefully and in context? Or was it through repeated exposure? Through what you were handed? Through what was handed to you by people who were themselves never given a reason to question it? That is metacognition. Thinking about your own thinking. Examining not just the conclusion, but the path that led you there. And it is one of the most powerful tools the remnant has. Because the moment you start asking how I came to believe this, the substitution begins to lose its grip. And neither do we know what has been replaced until something makes us stop and look. This is what the enemy intends, that you would no longer remember what was there before, that the generation that knew the original would pass, that the children would grow up in the substitution and call it truth, that there would be no one left to say, this is not what it was. That is the goal. Not opposition, not argument, erasure, quiet, patient, generational erasure. But the enemy did not account for one thing. The pattern has never worked completely, not once. In every generation where substitution advanced, God preserved a witness. This pattern is not modern, it is ancient. Jeroboam set up golden calves in Bethel and Dan and told Israel, these are your gods that brought you out of Egypt. He changed the location of worship. He changed the priesthood. He changed the appointed times. And most all of Israel followed him, but not all. The Pharisees added tradition upon tradition until tradition had more authority than the Torah itself. Until keeping the commandments of men was called righteousness. Until the Son of God standing before them looked like a threat. But there were still those who recognized him. The remnant was there then. The remnant is here now. In every generation where substitution has advanced, there has been a remnant. Not a majority, never a majority, but a people who remembered, who held to what was given, who refused to call the counterfeit the original. Noah remembered. Elijah remembered. The 7,000 who had not bowed to Baal, they remembered. And the remnant remembers. This is not a small thing. This is everything. Because what the remnant carries, the truth, the covenant, the alignment, cannot be erased as long as someone is still carrying it. The remnant remembers, and that is enough. If this is resonating with you, if something in your spirit has been saying something is off, we invite you to go deeper with us. The Remnant, the gradual replacement of truth, examines this pattern in full, how it works, where it entered, and what it means to return to alignment. The link is in the description below. Subscribe to this channel. New discussions every week. We are returning to truth through alignment. Yah will rise.